Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to the much-awaited collaboration between myself, Jimmy James at EOTT, and my brother Jason from over at ARCHAIX. Jason, how are you, brother?
I'm doing good.
Fantastic. Good to hear, my friend. Good to hear. It's been a long time coming, brother. It's been one of those where I think the stars have aligned, the holographies have aligned, and we've finally connected. So it's going to be an absolute pleasure to really get to know you a bit more, Jason, and really discover your path. You know, you're currently how would you describe you're more than a landscape gardener, right? You're more of how would you describe your current
Well,
business, what you do?
I specialize in hardscape, which is we're not really landscapers. We come in and we do the stone work. They're building a new house, or if somebody buys a new home and they want a flagstone driveway, they want statues, they want a koi pond, they want things that typical landscapers don't do. We come in with the mortar and the rock, and we just do hardscapes. These are permanent constructions that are added to somebody's home.
Beautiful. Yes, I'll put some links in the description box because I've seen some of your work and it's quite a sight to behold. And talking of statues, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later on. But before we do, Jason, tell us, as we do, as is traditional for EOTT, tell us a little bit about yourself, brother, your journey, how it all started, and, you know, give us a bit of your early days and we'll kind of go off from there, if you'd be so kind.
Well, I can give it to you in 30 seconds. I was adopted at age 5 off the streets. I don't know too much about my original family. I was adopted in Houston, Texas by the Breshears family. My original last name is Durant. My name Breshears is, of course, my adopted name. I did not adjust, and for about 10 years, I just went through some family upheavals. I never did adjust. By age 15, I left with a backpack on my back, and I pretty much walked across the United States for 2 years until I got in trouble at age 17 and landed me in prison. In prison, I got in a lot more trouble because I really didn't feel like I deserved to be there. And I got more sentences. I got put into situations where I couldn't control, and it was either be a victim or victimized. And of course, I chose the latter, and I ended up getting more prison time. And by the time I made it out, I was 43 years old after spending 26 years and 48 days in Texas prison. That's pretty much in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much indeed. And yeah, just a few little points of that one. Having done a little bit of prison myself in the UK, I can semi-relate, but I think it's fair to say the American prison system is another kettle of fish altogether. You know, I've read a few books, and as you probably know, I've been interviewed by Sean Atwood, who spent some time in Arizona. And yes, the prison system's no joke over there, brother. As you say, it's kill or be killed sometimes, you know, and it's one of those. But you managed to turn it around. How far into the sentence was it, Jason, before you kind of knuckled down with the education, or was it just kind of progression all the way through and then certain things clicked somewhere along the way?
Well, as a teenager, prior to my incarceration, I already had a deep fascination with human history. The narrative that was forced down my throat in elementary and junior high school was absolutely rebelled against. I couldn't accept. There was no in my mind, for me to accept a concept, there has to be a link of chain of circumstances and evidence that would build to that final picture. And I was in my education, in our education in the UK, in the United States, we were force-fed these concepts of
Pearson, sorry to interject, but only very quickly, brother. Pearson seem to be the guys in charge of all the Western education, but go on. Thank you.
Okay. I just know that we're force-fed these final concepts, but there's no chain like in if I was talking about in legal parlance, there would be a chain of custody. And this is how my research, this is why I research the things I do and the methodology that I employ. There has to be a chain of custody for me to complete a final concept, a final picture. You can't just tell me something was the way it was without showing me how it got there. And this was my problem with the education. And what I did in prison was act like a damn knucklehead for about 11 years. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to sit here and try to hide it. My entire body from my neck all the way to my feet is covered in one single tattoo. It covers my whole body. The only thing that I did do was to satisfy my adopted mother's. She just didn't want to see anything on my neck, my face, my hands, and I honored that. I have nothing there, but the rest of my body's completely done. So, in prison, in my 11th year, I realized I'm not getting out. parole is an illusion. They have completely politicized the parole process, and everything the prosecutor and judge told me from the beginning was not necessarily a lie, because the legislative intent at the time was for me to get out of prison after 7 years. But judges and prosecutors don't know what future legislations are going to do. And when they create new laws retrospectively, ex post facto, to the general public, it's illegal, but to the imprisoned population, retrospective laws are absolutely illegal. They're employed all the time. These new parole laws kept me in prison an additional 10 years. Knowing that I was going to be a lot older by the time I got out, I started pursuing my interests and hooking up with different individuals, benefactors, patrons, organizations that would fund my education. By the time I got out at 43 years old, my bibliography was 1,567 nonfiction books that I had studied and data mined.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. As you can see, I was just jotting a few notes down there, thoughts that came from that little conversation, and thank you for the information. So the first one being, you talked about, history and our understanding and the multiple layers you have to dig down through. But before we get to that, I was going to ask about your access to information, because, for example, in HMBL stock, I was able to order The Curse of Ignorance by an author called Arthur Findlay. Really old book, and they brought it in from external library. It took 2 weeks to come. And later on in the journey, I think it's fair to say all the libraries had a pretty decent selection of books. All of it mainstream, granted. But then when you got to Park Prison, the library was phenomenal. And the guy there, I got really friendly with him, and he would essentially order anything I asked him to order. Everyone was able to do it through the order book, but he said, because we used to chat about, any ones you want, just let me know. And the ones that he couldn't get, I was able to order off Amazon, as long as they went on the banned list. So I was able to utilize the time quite effectively and devour just as much knowledge as I could, basically. So with regards to the access within prison, as well as the patrons and benefactors, can you talk to us a little bit more about kind of the progression of access and how that became easy for you as you went through it?
Here is a very unique phenomenon we find in Texas prison. The prisons I was at, like the Walls unit, the Eastham unit, the Estelle unit, some of these units are over 100 years old. Libraries are full of books from the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. We're talking about pre-World War II. Come 1946, after the Nuremberg trials, almost every single American history book was rewritten, redacted, and edited, and basically scrubbed. Any history books you can get your hands on before 1944 are gold mines of information. Even the Encyclopedia Britannicas were accurately reporting things up until the 1920s. It's after the 2 world wars that we have some serious problems. The history books, we can do a comparative analysis between historical texts and monographs, even archaeological monographs after World War II. They don't say the same things as the ones before World War II, even though they're by the same authors, same publishers. Well, my benefit in my incarceration is I had access to these libraries. And when prison librarians found out what my interests were and what I was doing, all I had to do was receive manifests from the other 116 prisons in Texas, and I had more information than a man can read in a lifetime. I had to cherry pick which historical books I wanted to read, so I stuck with all those that were 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century. I pretty much left 20th century records alone that are post-World War II, simply because of the huge systemic censorship, the rewriting of history. So the benefit of my research is that I had original source materials, and this is why I say in my archaics group over and over that I pride myself that none of my data comes from an internet source. It's all from original books and reports. That's the benefit of being a prisoner in Texas. You have access to materials that most people don't even know used to be in print.
As they say, thank you again, brother. As they say, everything happens for a reason, right? And they're probably,
no doubt.
Let's not put anyone on a pedestal or anything, but there's probably were very few people, and no doubt you met people very similar to yourself, but very few who had the inclination or even the desire or even the ability, having that, you said you had your background kind of experience of being a teenager and a good foundation. And I myself had a good foundation, but I always had libraries, dictionaries, thesaurus, and you'd be reading something and go, what's this? And then boom, 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 give me a thesaurus, give me keep saying library. I mean to say dictionary. And yeah, that just grows and grows and advances. So that's a fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. I must have.
Well, Jimmy, I'm going to have to interject with an anecdote that's very humorous, although I admit with
Please do.
embarrassment.
Please do.
Listen,
Everything on the table, brother.
when I was 20 years old, I wrote home. The greatest accomplishment of my life after 3 years of imprisonment, I wrote home and told my father that, hey, I did something. I took a Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary and I broke the entire thing down on 17 legal pads, front and back. And I created a system where every word's antonyms were recorded on a line and all the synonyms were created on another line. I was so proud of it. I studied it and I sent it home. And my dad wrote me a letter back and says, boy, you rediscovered the thesaurus. I had no idea at 20 years old what a thesaurus was, but I had done it on my own with just a dictionary sitting in the jail cell and then in prison. But yeah, to my embarrassment, I admit that. I smile on it in retrospect, but at the time I was very embarrassed about that.
That was fascinating. Fascinating. And that's what it is, you know, words are powerful things. And this is, I always talk about telepathy, you know, I fully believe we're telepathic beings and language has been used to degrade our communications through the resets, through the derivations, you know, English being the most recent derivation of Latin, the language of commerce. It's designed for business, pretty much commercial business. And as a result of that, where we have immigrants from all different countries and cultures all across the planet, they're trying to explain something to me in English and they're saying, there is no way to explain what I'm trying to say to you. You don't have the words. You know, I witnessed this, you know, experienced it myself. I thought, oh, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Yeah, words are powerful. This is it, brother. And kind of, yes, exactly. And again, it kind of feeds into the whole knowing and understanding. It's one thing to know something, but to actually understand what it is that you know. And I'm sure, like myself and like yourself, you've had these kind of epiphany moments. You go, oh my God, I've always known that, but I didn't realize it meant that, you know? So, yes, fascinating. So was that basically the core? Because when I read that you sent your manuscript rather, to the authors, and they said that you got quite a few books from them, was that kind of saving up your prison earnings and ordering books externally as well then to bolster the prison?
You're talking about Book Tree Press in San Diego.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's a different story. That was long after I had already done all this other research, and in 2003, I saw an old prison catalog, Book Tree of San Diego, and I flipped through the books and I saw all these metaphysical books by Francis Barrett and Simon Magus and all these alchemical books, and then I looked in the historical section. I saw all these other books that I have remembered from the bibliographic references of the old books that I had studied in other prisons, and I said, well, here's a guy who's reprinting all these old books I haven't had access to. So I wrote him and I told him exactly what I was doing, what my agenda was, my plan. I sent him some manuscripts and he didn't contact me for over 7 months. I gave up on him, but I was ordering books from him. So my budget in prison was like $75 a month that I could order books. I could just sit here, I could order every month. All my money went to books. And every month I was excited to get that package to see what I was going to learn. I data mine everything. I don't keep books. I don't have an extensive library anymore because it's the information that's valuable to me, not the actual book itself. I normally pass the books on to other prisoners. I had no use for them once I data mined them. But Paul Tice, the publisher of Book Tree, contacted me after 7 months and sent me a contract. And the contract stipulated that he had the rights to the next 5 books that if I agree to a publishing contract, he gets first rights on the next 5 books. So we stuck to that. He's published 5 of my books now. I have a lot more to release. I just don't have the time to put them together. I'm a busy man.
Yes, and this is unfortunate. Thank you, brother. This is unfortunate. It seems to be, whilst, you know, you do fantastic, phenomenal work and you make people very happy with your living, it's wasted on you, brother. You know, it's just something you're able to physically do. And I think some of us, unfortunately, take a while to kind of find that way of facilitating what is our true passion. You know, you don't need much money, do we? That's what I always boil it down to. I don't need a great deal of money, just enough to get by, be happy, and do the things that I want to do.
Just enough to pay the bills.
This is it, brother. This is it. Enough to pay the bills and, you know, maybe do a little bit of exploring as well and beyond that, you don't really need much more. And yeah, I look forward to the day, brother, when, like you said, at the moment, you've got, what, boxes full of manuscripts, essentially, under the bed?
And I have boxes that actually recently I asked for help from some members of Archaics, and I've already sent 2 manuscripts to a lady that wants to type them up, and we'll see how that goes. But just to see, volunteers to start transcribing these and getting them ready for publication, because that would definitely abbreviate my ability to get this material out.
Fantastic. Thank you, brother. And I think it'd be really nice, actually, to try and get this out far and wide, because I know we have many similar interests. People like your John Levy, your Martin Leakey, Roger over at Mud Falls University. I always give you guys a shout, always in the same kind of round when people ask them what do I get into myself, where do I find my personal cutting edge, as it were. But if you'd be so kind, Jason, talk us through your own bibliography of your own creations from the beginning. What was the first one you put together? I know the Chronicon you put out there for free, which is quite an extensive.
Well, Chronicon was what started everything. I had no intention of writing a book. What I wanted to do, because I'm data mining all these books, my original project, which began about 1999, right around the Y2K deal. My original idea was to put together an entire chronology of the world that assimilated every ancient timekeeping system, calendar, and dating method that we have in recorded history. I wanted to show exactly what year and what month it was for each dating system that was going, so we could see the parallels and we could draw inferences on what civilizations were going, what kind of contacts there were, what was happening transcontinentally, and trying to identify particulars where there were beyond coincidence, such as the exact same protagonists, the exact same stories, the exact same plot lines, the exact same pantheons, the exact same traditions and stories found on continents that are separated by oceans by people who are thought to have absolutely no contact. And yet here in Chronicon, we can see 100% definitive evidence that there were correlates. There was a mariner race that was spreading all this like a syllabus. These stories might not even been real, but it was their stories, and we have them recorded everywhere. And by studying a people's calendar and how they process time, we can learn a tremendous amount of material about them. Because chronology is the absolute most ignored study in history today. Ancient chronicons, chronographical references, there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of them in all the texts that we have today, but no historians ever touched this subject. And it's tainted. Like Graham Hancock, his own research can absolutely be refuted. Zechariah Sitchin can be refuted, every bit of it, just by citing the actual dates that the texts that they cite say. But in order to promote their theories, they have to ignore these chronographical references. They have to completely do away with them and cherry pick their data in order to put these theories, these fantastic theories of a 10,000 BC Atlantis. And there wasn't Atlantis, there was an Atlantean empire. And the Egyptians were very specific on their lunar dating code. And other scholars during Plato's day even censured Plato for going with a huge 9,000 year date when the Egyptians only counted in months. Every date in the Egyptian text from the Turin Papyrus on back was by lunar reckoning, which means you divide every number they give you by 12 and you have almost an exact date. And archaeology confirms that Athens was indeed dated to the 13th century BC, which is exactly what the Egyptians said if you go by their lunar reckoning. But if you go by the Zechariah Sitchin reckoning or Plato's reckoning, you get 9,000 BC, and there was no Athens in 9,000 BC. And I isolate like 6,000 of these examples in Chronicon for people to see that our history is cohesive. It's not as mysterious as you think. The only mystery are the fictional introductions by modern authors who are not being censored.
Thank you, brother. Yes, indeed. And I saw a fantastic video the other day that kind of mirrors exactly what you're saying. And it was a Google talk by a chap called Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology. Are you familiar with
I read his book. His book is over 900 pages. It was Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, I believe, are the co-authors of Forbidden Archaeology.
Right, indeed. I've not read the book myself, and it was the first time I'd even stumbled upon it. And it is, there's so many people out there. But yeah, and he was breaking it down. So he says, all right then, so our kind of modern understanding is, humans go back 200,000 years. Are you still there, Jason? You're frozen. Oh, you are, you're right.
No, you're moving now. You were frozen for a minute.
Was the audio okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, fantastic. And yeah, so he goes, all right then, so what's our common understanding? You know, yeah, 200,000 years. You go, right, okay. He goes, so what I decided to do was look at the primary evidence, not the secondary evidence, which is what you were describing earlier, post
Right.
1945.
Right.
It doesn't matter what primary evidence comes in from any source, you know, scholars, universities, etc. What ends up in the secondary evidence, which is the textbooks for the universities, the medical training schools, etc., contain none of these primary records, and they're not just dozens, there's hundreds, sometimes thousands, you know. And he basically goes right into it, and you should watch the video, or not you, but, you know, the listeners if they've not seen it. And yeah, you know, humans can go back 6 million years by all accounts. So, kind of blows a lot of this mainstream stuff out of the water, and that brings me right back up to my first note, which was, again, the layers. I absolutely adored reading Graham Hancock and Zachariah Sitchin and all of David Icke's stuff, and multiple authors. But that's just the first level to catch you. You go, this first layer is not satisfying your curious little human mind. All right, then have the next layer, the mainstream funded. You know.
Yeah, I don't take away from the importance of their work and their research.
I think you need it.
Yes, they're citing real facts. I just don't like their interpretation.
Well, I think, again, you need to go through these different layers to be able to, you know, we come back to cognitive dissonance, and we'll come, you know, back to it in a bit more depth later, but every now and again we'll come to our cognitive dissonances. What were the kind of real cognitive dissonances that you struggled with during your kind of exploration of stuff?
That's a good question, because who you're talking to today is not the man that existed 8 years ago.
Indeed.
And let me quantify that. For the first 40 years of my life, I was absolutely Southern Baptist, Texan, hardcore conservative, right? Basically, Bible thumping. I used to argue against Muslims. Hey, listen to me. I was washing the blood of the Lamb. You couldn't tell me anything, man. I'm a savior. I'm going to heaven. I'm not trying to hear it. I got the research to back it up. I've read the Bible over 60 times in prison, and I have the handwritten notes to prove it. I went from Genesis through Revelation, every book of the Bible, man. I've even released about 6 different YouTube videos about my discoveries on the biblical material, and they're not what most Christians are going to believe until they see the video. But those videos cite absolutely nothing but the Bible, nothing else. So when I was 40 years old, I finally hit a wall where I can no longer justify what I'm reading in the scripture as opposed to what I'm told by people who believe the scripture. I can't see the correlates. I've been listening to it all my life, what people believe, they consider themselves Christians and what they believe in. And yes, many of them are very spiritual people and their heart's in the right place. But you are culling data from texts that also say, murder your enemy's baby. You know what I mean? Suffer not a woman to live. If she's an adulteress, you stone her outside the city walls. No court, no trial, no anything. So there are
I can half agree with that one, but I'm jesting. Go on.
Yes, but there are several scriptures that absolutely require a believer to kill an enemy, to murder. It even says, dash the heads of infants on stones, ravage the women. I said, listen, I don't care if people want to sit there and justify it and say, well, that was God talking to the Jews, or the Jewish people have a special license to murder their enemies. I don't care what your justification is. This book that I had believed was the word of God is telling me these things, while these people, on the other hand, who are using the New Testament as the word of God, are telling me just the opposite. I cannot be pulled in 2 different directions and ever think I'm going to arrive to a destination. It's not going to happen. So cognitive dissonance, this great wall that I had been hitting for about 3 years, finally broke when I was 40 years old, and I decided to divorce myself from everything I had previously believed and look at all my research notes, which were in the thousands of pages at the time, and go back through everything again with a fresh eye. And it took some doing. It took about 300 pots of coffee. I just sat in a prison cell and I reanalyzed everything I believed. I went through all the data that I had been data mining, and I came up with several discoveries for which I now have published books. Unique things that no one else has ever heard of. You have no idea how many people have contacted me saying that this Phoenix chronology blows their mind. The amount of data to prove that there is a phenomenon that occurs on this planet where mud falls from a blue, clear sky and buries entire civilizations and cities, islands, ships at sea, It happens every 138 years somewhere on this world. It doesn't happen. It's not ubiquitous. It doesn't happen everywhere. Only 2 times in recorded history has this phenomenon ever even covered an entire hemisphere. But the chronology is real. I didn't date any of it. It was an accidental discovery when I just realized that too many of these stories were the same. And so many civilizations invented things around the same times. And when I started researching the why of it, I found resets. I found, wait a minute, these things were already priorly known, so why are they being rediscovered? And I find these resets over and over. When I look, I find a Phoenix episode, and everything is exactly 138 years apart. These civilization resets, when I made these discoveries about the Phoenix, and in 2006 offered a manuscript for publication, Booktree jumped on it and published it in 2009. But in waiting for them to publish it for 2 years, I made so many more discoveries. Now that I know what I'm looking for, I ordered the right materials, found more references that I had read from prior books that I'd already passed on to other inmates. So I had to reorder those books, because when you're data mining material and you have an objective, you're automatically going to exclude material that doesn't support your paradigm. So I had to reread over 200 nonfiction history books to get that data back. It cost me a pretty penny. It cost me quite a bit of money, but I did it to get that information back, and I published Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, which has over 100 new facts about the Phoenix phenomenon and Phoenix chronology. So the added benefit of cognitive dissonance is that it sent me in a new direction where I could actually have facts to back up a belief, rather than have other people tell me what to believe based off a cherry-picked text.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very poignant, brother, very poignant. And is it fair to say you wouldn't change your experience for the world?
You know what? I often get this blank look from people when I tell people I'm 47 years old and I spent 26 years and 48 days in Texas prison. They don't. I see them trying to process that. They don't understand. I was a 17-year-old kid when I got out. I was 43 when I went in. I'm 43 when I got out. I'm 47 now. I've been out for 3 years, almost 4. So I wouldn't change it for the world, because I know for a fact that had I had stayed in the free world at 17 and not gone to prison, I would not be the man who I am today. I would have not have been this information sponge that just took tremendous amount of data from so many different sources and put it into a single cohesive format. I would have never done that. As a matter of fact, I don't know anybody who has ever been free, even with a doctorate, who has read as many nonfiction reference books as I have. I don't see how they could with family.
Not in the real world.
There's too much.
No.
There's no way to do it. So in prison, I got up early in the morning. I got my coffee ready, ate me a little snack, and for about 8-9 hours, that's what I did: read, write, and research. Then I hit the rec yard, exercise. I'm still in excellent physical condition today. That was my routine. And then I went to my little 4-hour job in prison, got home, did about 2 or 3 hours of light reading, data mining, and then went to sleep and did it all over again the next day. And I did this for years.
Thank you, brother. That's my thing. I think I read near enough 1,000 books when I was in jail, maybe a little bit less. And fair to say, let's just say 60-40 non-fiction, fiction. And I would do my research in the day, and then in the evening, then just a bit of light reading, a bit of sci-fi, a bit of fantasy, a bit of whatever.
I did that a lot too. I did because it wasn't the subject matter of this video. I do have to say, yes, I read a lot of fiction too, because it relaxes the mind. It's not fiction. Reading fiction is nothing like nonfiction, where you have to process the information.
Indeed. But what we also find then is these little references and different things, Easter eggs as they call them, within these books, and you go, but a lot of truth hidden in plain sight as science fiction, as fantasy, and you go, this isn't fantasy. These things used to be real. These are the, So that feeds us on lovely. And now I've written a list of all your videos, but I would rather, would you just be kind enough to kind of give us a little breakdown of some of the ones that excite you the most? Because you kind of cover quite a few different topics, as is your nature to want to get it all out there. But what are the topics? I've got a few of my own, but I'll let you go first. What are the kind of real topics that you've made videos on that really excite you?
Well, I'm gonna have to go back just a minute.
Please do. Yeah.
In my studies, putting Chronicon together, which is free to the public. It's 510 pages, but it has 735 pages of supplemental notes. So it's a huge work, but it's free to the public on the Archaix Facebook group or on archaix.com. Anybody can download those PDFs. Now, in putting this timeline together, it became readily apparent after my 40th year that there is a mathematical structuring to our history that defies explanation. I cannot sit here and try to explain to you in any terms, layman nor scientific, what I found, other than the fact that our entire history is patterned. And it's patterned in Fibonacci codes, it's patterned in palindromes, it's patterned in these awesome, beautiful 5.08 spirals. It's patterned in sequences that occur in cycles and epicycles of 3.1416. All our physics constants can be found in the time between events that occurred in history that were very similar in nature. It doesn't matter if it's a plague in Brussels in Europe. I can pretty much show you using the Fibonacci sequence, pi, phi, curvature equations, palindromes, isometric projections. I can show you when the next plague occurred based off the mathematics of the past two. What's happening, what I found was a structuring. It is a mathematical construct. It is basically a coding. And the same arithmetic appears in the double helix of our DNA. The same arithmetic appears when you flush your toilet and watch the water go down. When you look at a spiral galaxy and you see the physics CGI of how that operates. These codes in the operation of the creation of a snowflake as temperature fluctuates. It's harrowing to actually think that all my beliefs and all my research can be summed up in just a few words. I believe that we are in a simulation. And long before I ever heard of simulation theory, I came upon on that belief, but I kept it to myself. It wasn't until I got out of prison and I saw YouTube videos that I even learned that other people had been entertaining this idea, but they entertain it from a CGI or a modern pop culture perspective. I had never seen anybody take the history of the world and show mathematical constructs that show that it's coded. So what I take from my entire life full of research is that I believe what Elon Musk believes. We are indeed in a simulation, but I don't believe Elon Musk can actually show it. He just theorizes it. And there are many people like him that haven't done the research they weren't in prison. There's no way they could have done it. It's scary when you think about it, but it's also beautiful because I understand that the architecture of the human personality is so definitive and so magnificent that somehow we are like immortal beings trapped in this huge mathematical construct that's not of our own design, but was built just for that purpose, for us not to live in, but to pass through. And this is what the arithmetic conveys. So my studies of history have basically turned me into a mathematician. It was by necessity just to understand the discoveries as they unfolded. So that's basically an answer to my question, is that cognitive dissonance divorced me from all these religious preconceptions to see reality as it was, and the reality that I see is a byproduct of what I have researched and seen in world history, not what's taught to me, but what I found. So yes, we live in a simulation. We live in a simulated environment, and it doesn't matter if it's Mandela effect or synchronicity or deja vu or coincidence. Whatever happens that's an anomaly in this existence can be readily explained in simulation theory. Almost every mystery of the ancient world can be explained in simulation theory. The flash frozen fossils of antiquity, which cannot be explained by uniformitarian and evolutionary models, butterflies, jellyfish, invertebrates, earthworms found petrified. It doesn't make sense according to the models that were given. But if these are prior simulated ecologies that were flash frozen to begin a new simulation, it all makes sense. The history of the world makes perfect sense to me now. It's not even mysterious. Even the Phoenix phenomenon, which I used to believe was the orbit of a decayed planet, a dead world that came too close to Earth and rained mud from a glacial sphere. All that is presented to me as a intruder planet. But nothing can orbit at a perfect synchronicity of 138 years and appear on May 16th every single time throughout 5,000 years of world history. It's impossible unless it's coding. And because of that conclusion, I have to say we live in a simulation, and many other conclusions besides.
Wonderful, thank you, brother. We'll get on to many more of these conclusions. So allow me to just address a couple of my notes I popped down here. So gematria, at what point did the concept of gematria come into your field of knowledge?
Well, initially I had ignored gematria because I am not impressed with Kabbalah systems. I'm
I
not
haven't got
impressed
into
with
it myself. Go on.
excuse me?
I'm sorry, but I was just saying I've not gone into it deeply myself. My partner's kind of a slightly bit more
Well,
okay with it, but go on.
yes, initially I had dismissed gematria for many reasons. One, I'm not interested in the ancient. Once I divorced myself from the biblical narrative, and that it itself is just a construct of a bunch of scribes making old Near Eastern text, I had dismissed it. But in the hermetical literature, in the alchemical literature, I kept finding the exact same concepts that were transcultural, even by people who were thought to have no contact. So I started studying gematria and I found some pretty interesting things. But again, it all goes back to coding. It all goes back to the fact that when we trace human scripts, not languages, but when we trace linear B back to linear A back to the old Hindu and the Sanskrit, when we find these original pictographs before there was alphabetical constructions, we find the exact same geometrical symbols transcontinental. The Chinese used the same symbols with the same concepts as the Ubaid and pre-Sumerian and Sumerian people. The Proto-Egyptian symbols that were found by Professor Waddell, who is absolutely hated by the establishment, but he showed that they were all Sumerian symbols. The very first dynasty of Egypt was Sumerian. It wasn't even Egyptian. That's why Waddell is hated. His research is phenomenal, but all his books were before World War II. Now, this gematria, this study of number concepts attached to letters, alphabetical designations, and words is very interesting, because when you use gematria to read certain biblical passages, you will find some very interesting things. I'll give you one example. There is a passage in the book of the prophet of Isaiah, which refers to an altar that is in the middle of the land of Egypt, but at the border thereof. It is an altar of God built of fire. Well, many people before me, before I was even born, believed that that passage referred to the Great Pyramid of Egypt and no other pyramids, which in old Hermetical literature was called an altar of God. In the Vedic, in the Vedic text, it was called the altar of Agni. Now, which was built by Brahma, another rendition of Abraham, and Saraswati, who was Sarah. But the interesting thing of gematria is if you add up every Hebrew letter in that one verse that describes that altar in the middle of Egypt and yet at the border thereof, it's 5,449. And anybody who has studied the Great Pyramid knows exactly that by the unit of measurement employed in the Great Pyramid itself, it is exactly 5,449 units high, which is 481 feet by our measurement today in the United States. Under metric, it's totally different. It's 41 stories high, but gematria reveals many secrets about many places. We've even found in gematria longitudinal, latitudinal coordinates. But gematria, to me, is not evidence of a highly sophisticated people in antiquity who knew the future. To me, it is evident as part of the coding of the simulation itself. There are too many synchronicities involving gematria when we read the New Testament, which was written in Greek, as opposed to the Aramaic passages where the same words have the same mathematical meanings, yet they're in totally different languages, which the Aramaic has many correlates mathematically with the Hebrew, totally different languages, but the mathematical designations for certain words are the exact same. I said, I don't see language anymore as the inventions of scribes. I see it as a part of our simulated holography.
Wunderbar. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Another few thoughts popped up there again. So it must have been amazing, even though, as you say, you came out and obviously discovered the internet. That must have been quite a thing to have access, unfettered access to the internet, only quite a few years ago. But it must have been quite vindicating to find people who were, it's not just confirmation bias, it's something that you know deep within yourself that you took a long time to kind of study and establish and go, right, okay, certain things I can know, as best we can, but then to find these people kind of talking about the same things, it must have been quite exciting to see. I'm not alone. That's not just me on the old quest, as they say.
Yeah, getting out was an experience, but it's not like it just happens. You have like 6 months to prepare. They tell you like 180 days in advance. So by the time I got out, I hit the ground running. I wasn't trying to experience all the things that I had missed. I'm already a 43-year-old man. I'm no longer a 17-year-old kid. The last time I saw the free world, 26 years is a long period of time. I'd already completely grown through my teens, my 20s, my 30s. I'm well into my 40s by the time they let me out. So I got out of prison with an agenda. I'm living that agenda now, which was to educate people. But confirmation bias isn't something that I came across. I was kind of discouraged my first year out because I didn't come up with confirmation bias. I came up with a lot of resistance. People were not willing to hear my ideas. You would believe how long it's taken me just to get 500 and something subscribers on my YouTube, even though I have 52 videos. My sister started a Facebook group called Nephilim Archives, and this is how I met Stephen Walsworth. He was always on the group checking out all my blogs, all my articles. Yeah, I really like Stephen.
He's my boy. He's my boy. Big shout out to Mr. Walsworth. Big shout out. He's been going through some tough times, but he'll be coming back with us soon. But yeah, he was the one who introduced me to Archaics.
Yes, well, he 2.5 years.
2017, I think 2017, late 2017. Was it up then?
It was January 2017. Yeah.
Oh, so it would have been mid 2017 then, of the summer of 2017. Yeah, and it was a sight to behold. But go on, brother, please.
Yeah, it was originally my website was nephilimarchives.com, and he was all over it. The original Facebook was Nephilim Archives. All that was changed because Nephilim is it's a micro to the macro of my research. You understand? So yeah. I divorced myself from that, and I went to Archaics because Archaics is a synonym. I mean, you've seen it over it. It's a play on words for those things that are ancient, but it's also talking about a simulated holography. So I do like Stephen, but you say the confirmation bias. I'm only now starting to experience that with some of my mud flood colleagues who are now coming around and realizing that they have documented something for which I've already provided a chronology for, and they're now looking into it. I did not understand. I did not know when I was in prison that there was such a thing as simulation theory, nor did I know of any mud floods. I learned these when I get out, and I find out it's all. I already had it documented in Chronicon. I just didn't call them those things. So I'm just now starting to receive that as I collaborate with you and other people. It's confirmation bias is okay, and sometimes it's the only reward we get, but it doesn't matter if I was going to meet with resistance till the day I die, because I'm absolutely 100% confident on May 16th in the year 2040, everything's going to change. And I have 5,000 years of historical research to back it up.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. It's my utmost wish to do a couple of round tables with some people who I know will just be able to, absolutely pick your brains to pieces and really put some stuff together. Martin Leakey, and that comes back to, again, you taking yourself away from the Nephilim tagline. Martin was very much proudly flat Earth British, but instantly you lose half your audience, right? Flat Earth British, but as you know yourself, you've seen a couple of his videos, no doubt. The guy is, he's a machine. He's on his game. He's got the big think tank behind him. Roger, Mudfossil University, again, I'm sure your works will synchronize fantastically. And you talk about, yes, there are very few people who are able to do the same amount of research and consume that amount of data. But there's one chap who he's agreed to come and chat with me. I've not chased him up for a while because I know he's a busy fella, but I will do very soon. It's Anthony Peake. Are you familiar with Anthony Peake?
No, I'm not.
Oh, the guy, you see the guy's libraries. The guy is just an absolute, he's got some intellect on him. He's got a powerful mind, and yes, he's a guy who can pick anything to pieces. And I'd love to, I'm going to hopefully link you guys up and say, right, come on then, let's really kind of get some stuff on the go, because I think this is where we need to go. More collaboration, more platform boosted, more help on each other. You just got to look at these comedians in LA, right? These comedians in LA are just monopolizing the online social media kind of platforms such as YouTube. It's entertaining, it's fun, but it's not important, and it's not real, and it's not actually what we need to be doing right now. Because as you say, Jason, there are resets coming, some perhaps more localized, some perhaps more globalized, but Can you talk to us a little bit about the 33rd parallel and what you've discovered regarding that kind of link into the narrative?
Oh, yeah. You talking about? I have a really short video about the 33rd degree. Is that what you're talking about?
33rd degree. Forgive me. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You know, there's a
The
lot of
the
there's a lot of
line, right?
yeah, there's a lot of conspiracy hypothesis about the Masons, the Freemasons, and uh, you have to go to the original source materials. Albert Pike in the 1887 published a book called Morals and Dogma. It's like 1,000 pages, and he goes into extreme detail about the first 32 degrees. Many other Masons have come forth, 33rd degree Masons, and published books, and they add more information about these degrees. And the first thing I had noticed right off the bat was I'm reading Chronicon through symbols. When I'm reading the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, the ancient degrees, I'm seeing the pre-flood world. It's right there. And I go all the way up to the 13th degree, and I see the 13th degree, all the symbolism concerns the building of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and that Enoch, just like all the ancient literature says, Enoch and Enki are the same people. They are they as the principal architect of the Great Pyramid. I find it fascinating to find that the Masons, through a system of rituals and degrees, are actually simulating historical events. So I follow the narrative of the 33rd degrees all the way up to the 32nd, and it's absolutely fascinating how these structures, these events that happened in world history, where you would think was just natural cause of flow of political events, were not there. They were intended, they were structured. And no one will say anything about the 33rd degree except give us the symbol for it. Now you have to understand, when I saw the symbol for the 33rd degree, I was shocked, because I'm looking at 32 degrees that tell the history of the world from the perspective of people who control it. Now, when I find the symbol for the 33rd degree is the phoenix, and all my research builds up till May 16th, 2040, the return of the phoenix, the sixth sky dragon of Mother Shipton, this great cataclysm that's going to happen a century after a second world war, according to Nostradamus. This huge, in the Nordic prophecies, this huge phenomenon that's going to swallow the moon and destroy the sun. The Fenris wolf, Fenris being also akin to the Druidic Fink, which was Phoenix, the Knoph of ancient Egypt, the Finga dragon of ancient China. They were all attached to this idea that the sun was going to go dark. The stars were going to vanish, and this simulated holography that we call the heavens was going to be changed. It's going to be a revelation that, look, you're not in the universe that you think you are. All of this is a multi-tiered hologram. This reset is going to be a shock to people, because it's not a cataclysm in the normal context. It is a total reboot of a system that gives us a false holography of the heavens. The 33rd degree of Mason, and the Masons are descendants of people. You understand? When I say Masons, I'm talking about the 1%ers. I'm talking about that few 1%ers,
right?
who are not actually Masons. They actually belong to other orders, because anything the public knows is really a cover. The true people that run the world are not Masons. It's just a finger on a fist. But they have revealed their agenda very cleverly in a system of rituals. And the 33rd is the return of the phoenix. The one thing that most of my videos are about, my published books, When the Sun Darkens, Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, Shocking Secrets of Antiquity, all these books are published about the 33rd degree and what will happen. Chronicon is a narrative of world history that builds up to the 33rd degree.
Yes, thank you, brother. It's something that plagues me basically daily. I know about it, and it's this thing of, is there actually anything you can do? How do you feel it all feeds into the 5G AI of essentially like downsizing, if you want to put it like that? And that's a very crude analogy to use, but do you want to elaborate on?
I don't know about the 5G, but I can answer what we can do, because I don't want to leave any of your listeners with the idea that the world's going to end in 2040. That's not what's happening here. Let me go back 4,000 years. It doesn't matter if we study the Aymara of ancient Peru. It doesn't matter if we start the Sino of Japan, or if we go back to the Yangtze River of China, the Ubaids of the pre-Sumerian people, the first dynasty of Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, every single valley civilization going back to the 3rd and 4th millennium BC shares a single story that is very common. And that after a great cataclysm destroyed the entire infrastructure of their world, a people showed up in ships on their shores and brought technology and brought new traditions, brought a syllabus that told them what to believe, brought them medicines, agriculture, brought domesticated animals. Now, these are people that are alleged to have no contact. They all told the exact same story. A bearded people visited smooth-skinned people and gave them civilization. Now, let's go 19.8 years into the future to May 16th, 2040. This is what my research shows. We are going to do the same exact thing. After a total global planetary, it doesn't matter what your model of the Earth is, a worldwide reset will occur. And after that, which Nostradamus and Mother Shipton are very clear about, those who were civilized and had their technology intact were hiding in underground facilities. They come up after the cataclysm, those that weren't buried in volcanic resurfacing, those who don't find that their structures, their facilities are now under half a mile of the Atlantic, the waters of the Atlantic, or like Australia, which popped up out of the Pacific Ocean in one single day, which is why the Australian continent has absolutely no human remains, no human relics. There's nothing there but placental, but marsupials. Australia is very phenomenal. You need to do a whole video on Australia.
I enjoyed that one. We can do another one on that one if you like, because yeah, it was like, oh, interesting.
In May 2040, we're going to have all these people in the world completely reset, their civilization infrastructure falling. And again, 500 years into the future from now, stories will be told that after a global reset, a huge destruction of the world, all of a sudden these people who were technologically advanced, they had seeds, they had animals, they had technology, they come up out of the ground and from across the ocean in ships that are very unusual, and they give us civilization, they give us agriculture, they give us seeding, they give us a syllabus. It's a total repeat. It's like we're in the simulation stuck in a loop. It's happened over and over and over.
I can resonate with that, Jason, absolutely 100%, you know, from having, you know, different psychedelic experiences, and then, you know, fits into the research. It does seem to be the Fisher Kings. What's your understanding of the term the Fisher Kings? That feeds into the same narrative? Something Dr. Wong discussed with me, the Fisher Kings, along those same kind of lines.
I'm going to sit here and confess to you that you're going to have to educate me on what your concept of Fisher King is.
Well, this is it, my brother. I must say, Dr. What we were talking about, basically what you were talking about, the idea of, you know, societal reset, and these Fisher Kings, perhaps who were previously hermits and retained their kind of knowledge, then delved into kind of fledgling society.
Well, from an archaeological perspective, there is a correlate here from an archaeological perspective. If I'm even talking about the same thing, I'm not sure. But
every day is a school day. We can always amend.
All throughout the Near East, we do have this concept of these half fish, half man kings that came and provided civilization, education, learning, syllabus, seeds. They brought civilization to all these cataclysm destroyed populations throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. I don't know if that's a correlate to what you're talking about, but we have statues of these half fish, half kings. They wear crowns. They have the bottom. The reason they had the statues show that they have a fish is it's theorized that it's because they came from the sea, and that at the time that these people appeared, the survivors of these cataclysms had no concept of a boat. They didn't understand what a boat was. They just know that people came from the sea. It's very similar to the concept of centaurs. The ancient Achaeans told stories of the centaurs, but the Greeks used to laugh about it because the Achaeans were the ancestors of the Greeks, but the centaur was nothing but an invader of a human sitting on top of a horse, and it wasn't understood. But the Fisher Kings is probably the same concept.
I believe so, yes. I believe so. That was the narrative we were discussing, and yeah, the Fisher Kings, as you say, the symbology gets misconstrued, mistranslated, probably on purpose half the time for these secondary resource materials.
Sometimes it's just a good story.
Indeed, indeed, yes, exactly. Well, I don't know. Let's talk about mud floods and different types of cataclysmic events. I'm ready. I'm more than happy for a cataclysmic event to occur. I'm pretty sure I'm going to survive it, and it'll be difficult afterwards. But
Well,
do you think we can have any kind of?
You say you're ready, Jimmy.
Yeah.
You say you're ready, but would you like to know exactly? Would you like to know exactly where you are in the eschatological narrative of prophecy today?
Go on.
I mean, I've already told you. I've already told you about, and all my research and published materials and videos are about May 16th, 2040. But you have to understand, that's an end event. That has nothing to do with the prophetic narrative in the beginning, because before that event can occur, which is called in the Sibylline oracles, which were stolen by the Christians and incorporated into the book of Revelation, that sixth seal is after 5 other events. We're about to enter those 5 other events. They happen over a course of 12 years. I don't know when they're going to happen, but I do know in the prophecy narratives of like Jesus, the prophet Jesus, whether you believe he's the son of God or not, it doesn't matter. What he said was very important. And he said that after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give its light. There will be tumultuous oceans, cities will disappear, all this stuff. So Phoenix is the same thing. The sun will darken, moon disappears, stars fall from the sky, all that. So we're looking at a narrative of 4 horsemen that have to occur before May 16th, 2040. And those 4 horsemen is the international public figure who claims to be a savior and is not. A war that follows. Hyperinflation is perfectly described in the book of Revelation when they talk about the price of oil and wine being 70 times more than normal. It's and then followed by a plague and a 5th horseman that very few people realize the text is talking about, called death. We're talking about things happening now on a worldwide scale, not just riots in the United States that don't affect the UK. You understand? We're talking about something that's going to affect every nation on this planet. It's 4 horsemen. And then the 5th seal is a silence. It might last 7 years. We don't know. But on May 16th, 2040 is the breaking of the 6th seal, which is the 33rd degree. It is the return of the phoenix. The phoenix is a symbol for a world that is entirely destroyed. It is burned, and a new world is grown out of the ashes, only by those who had prepared for it. Like I said, that's why they're building deep earth biospheres right now.
Oh yeah, baby! All those trillions of dollars of U.S. taxpayers' money has just been. Where's it all gone? I wonder. We know exactly what it's going.
The money NASA has gotten alone just from the American taxpayer is funding the majority of these, because they're not sending anything up. That's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, for sure. Wanted to ask. I've got a few things written down, but what did you have much access to movies in prison? Because I'm in Britain basically now. I only went to prison in 2008. TVs are a standard, so you've got things like Film 4. So you've got quite a constant access to movies. Later on we had.
I will say this, man. Texas has always been very antiquated in its criminal justice system. My first 13 years, we had no access to a TV whatsoever. They finally put them in. Around 2003, they put them in. We could watch movies, but I'm not a fan of sitting in a crowded day room with a bunch of other guys trying to look at a little bitty screen while guys are in the back slamming dominoes and yelling and screaming. If it's not enjoyable to me, I'm not going to do it. I basically spent my life on the rec yard, out in the open sky, just reading books and underlining material and then copying it into my notebooks.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was assuming it was going to be something along those lines. As you say, we had them in the cells, so you have that privacy, but obviously if they.
Oh no, yeah. There's no TVs in cells in Texas.
And the only reason I asked is because I want to follow on. Did you watch many when you came out, or did you just find that wasn't really a thing that appealed to you? Because there's a movie called The Road by a guy called Viggo Mortensen, which is like some post-apocalyptic kind of scenario, and it just resonates with, just what you were describing there.
But don't get me wrong, I love movies. I love cinema. I like sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, those are my preferences. Especially when it's a real good twist on something that they can get me to suspend my disbelief. But my problem is Jimmy, I can't sit still for more than 5 minutes without wanting to do something productive. I just can't.
Right.
I will get bored in the middle of a movie and want to either do a video, do some research, something might have been nagging me about an article I wrote in the past, and I'll go rewrite the whole damn thing.
That's the spirit about you, brother. That's why I love you. You know what I mean? I just resonate. Some people are pioneers of the human experience, as I like to call it. You know, kind of not satisfied with what's provided for us during this. You know.
Well, it's an innate curiosity because I'm not smarter than anybody else. I have an eighth grade education. I have 100% an eighth grade education. In prison, I got a GED. In prison, I went to a 2-year college. I don't have a high IQ. I don't believe. I've never been tested. But I will say this, I don't believe in my dialogue with other individuals, man. I'm any more intelligent than the average person. I'm just more knowledgeable because I've taken the time to come into contact with that information. But anybody can learn what I learned. It's really no big deal. You just read a book.
Indeed, and everyone has a piece of the puzzle. You know, despite all your years of knowledge, there might be one little nugget. You know, you might stop and chat to a homeless guy, and he might just, you know, spark into a conversation. You start talking about what you're about, and he might just give you one little thing, and you go, "Oh shit!" And this is it.
There is. I have another anecdote for that too, man. You got listen to this. In 2007 or 2008, I had been doing some research on Charles Piazzi Smith, and every single thing I came into contact about this man from 1880, when he had published his book, The Great Pyramid: Our Divine Inheritance, was secondhand information. I'm reading all these books from the 1890s, early 1910. I went through the David Davison material, Flinders Petrie material. Everything I come across is secondhand information. It's really stressing me out because I can't find the book. It's out of print. So I'm having a discussion with another prisoner while I'm leaning on a broom because I'm supposed to be sweeping the run, but I never did actually do my job. I went cell to cell asking people what books they had. And sometimes I paid money for those books. Sometimes I traded books. You know how the prison culture is. Everything has value. You just got to find out what people want. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's telling me he doesn't really have any books, but his cellie does. You know how guys live together in 2 cells.
Yeah.
So I look on his shelf from the bars, and I see Charles Piazzi Smith, 1881, Our Divine Inheritance. That's all that's on the spine. So I said, let me see that book right there. So he hands it to me, and here is a book. The last time it was ever published was like 1921, 1922. And here it is in Texas prison, and a guy is using it to hold up his coffee pot. The irony is I gave the man a bag of coffee for a book that had no value to him whatsoever.
Yes, beautiful.
So I gave him a little Maxwell, or I forgot what kind of coffee we had. It always changed. Every month it was something different. But I gave him a bag of coffee to get that book. And this is just one story out of many where I was looking for different types of material, and it was almost as if the universe would bring it to me. And here I am in a South Texas hot prison cell with no air conditioning. It's 110 degrees outside the cell, but the concrete and the iron gets so damn hot. People don't realize we don't have air conditioners in Texas prison. That's a myth. They do not have that there in Huntsville either. So here I am sweating my ass off doing research and all this and stuff, and books would come to me from sources that you wouldn't believe. I would get letters from people that I didn't even know that they knew I existed. I'm just some guy sitting in a prison cell doing some reading, but they had heard from me from somebody else, and they would send me books or ask me if there was any books that they could get me. Money wasn't an option. So I come across people who are patrons, that are benefactors, that sent me some awesome materials. I had someone go and photocopy books from the New York Public Library, books that date to the 1910, 1920, books by Lewis Spence and people that their books are out of print today. You can't get copies of them, but you can get them on loan from the New York Public Library. So it was just synchronicities that filled my life. When you're searching for something, it's almost as if reality itself will reciprocate.
Beautiful, brother. That's exactly what Dr. Wong described it as. It's an interactive reality. If you put yourself out there, synchronicities will occur, and the universe will become an abundant universe. Jason, our connection's kind of popping in and out. I'm really worried you might have missed a couple of minutes of volume there, but not to worry. Can I just pause us for a minute, brother, and we'll continue in a minute? Crack on with hour or two? It's been fantastic. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And let me just pause. I'll pause this a second just to make sure our connection's all right. Beautiful. So we're back in action. So, one note I just wanted to catch up on there was we're talking about Sanskrit. Now, I found some information. I was talking about Welsh, my home territory, my home country. The Welsh language, which is very kind of a sing-songy language, goes up and down. And to my shame, I've not learned the language. I should have done. I probably will do at some point. That is one of my bucket list items. But yeah, the Welsh language, being one of the most undiluted on the planet, very much resonated with Sanskrit. What can you tell us about Sanskrit, Jason? How far back does it go through our kind of derivations of different kind of languages and resets and whatnot?
First, I will enlighten you that there is a correlate between Sanskrit and Welsh, and that's, you're familiar with the Welsh triads.
I'm not going to lie and say yes, because I'm not. I know about the Druids, but not the Welsh triads. No, that's not something that's come across my path. Or maybe it's an interesting stick, but go on, please tell us more.
Yeah, Welsh triads are like poems that are in hexameter.
Okay.
Very similar to ancient Sanskrit. There are many Sanskrit texts that were in verse, but the verse was in hexameter. It's very, very interesting. Now, you have my air conditioners just came on. Can you hear me fine?
No, I think you're absolutely fine, brother. I didn't hear any change of volume, so it should be good.
Excellent. Yeah, this is Texas. We got to have our air conditioners.
Woo! I'm sweating as well. You can see I've been out in the sun all day streaming, so yeah, I can resonate with that.
So Sanskrit is very interesting. The original Vedic text, we have the Atharva Veda, the Rig Veda, the later ones like the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. When the Sanskrit had become corrupted and had devolved into basically what we call Hinduism today, and the texts of Hinduism are there are more a perspective from Dravidian culture than the original Aryan culture of the Sanskrit, the original Veda. Now,
Jason, sorry, brother, to interject. You weren't coming through then for a minute, but I feel like my connection's just playing up slightly.
Can you hear me clearly now?
You're coming through absolutely fine now. Yeah. Sorry, brother. Can you just start that little thread again, and we'll see how we go?
Okay.
You were talking about the hexagram Welsh triads and the link then to the previous research with the Sanskrit poems.
Okay. Well, to get a better perspective of the Sanskrit, the original Vedic text, we have to understand that we're dealing with ancient writings that are absolutely devoid of anything fantastic. Now, other writings from the period, which a lot of people are focused on Sumerian texts being the most ancient, and they're not. They're not. The concepts in the Vedic texts they far antedate the Sumerian. The Sumerian is full of gods. It's full of gods and goddesses and their contentions, and it humanizes them, and it's full of all kinds of interesting religious concepts. But what's missing in the Sumerian text is found everywhere in the original Vedic text, and that is flight manuals, pre-flight instructions, aerial combat, different methods to take down another combatant in the air in a craft called a vimana. We have medical procedures in Vedic texts that are not found anywhere else in the entire world. And there are over 100 different Sanskrit texts that survive today. Most of them the Western world has never heard of other than specialist literature. Now, we have surgical procedures that can be followed today found in Sanskrit writings, man, but you don't find any of this in Sumerian texts. Sumerian texts may date to the 4th millennium BC, but that's highly questionable, especially because human writing, we have found no evidence of human writing till after the 22nd century BC. However, some of those writings do have colophons. Those colophons indicate by a scribe that this is a copy of a much older text. However, we haven't found those original texts those colophons are derived from. This is the Sumerian problem. We have a belief system today that the Sumerians have the oldest writings, but we don't have the evidence of that. The only reason this is believed is because those libraries were buried in mud. Mud completely buried Nineveh, Nippur, Ugarit, and all these ancient sites where these giant libraries were found, like 22,000 tablets in the city of Nippur alone. Nineveh, 26,000 tablets. We have over 100,000 tablets in the Oxford Museum, in the Oxford basements of the Oxford Museum Library today from these ancient libraries. Some of them are translated, most of them are not. But they're nothing like the Vedic. The Vedic original Sanskrit texts were not etched in stone. They were passed down manuscript by manuscript by manuscript, and many of them still preserve their original sophistication. It's almost as if a bunch of guys from the UK wrote a bunch of flight manuals and medicinal instructions and surgical texts, and then turned around and buried them for 4,000 years, and 4,000 years from now, they're dug up. Whereas archaeologists would compare those with the fairy tales and the myths of the UK from the 14th century. You follow me?
Very interesting.
So yeah, the Vedic texts they're in a league of their own. Now I'm not talking about the later texts like the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita. Those are Dravidian influence. That is after the Aryans had departed, left their information, and the local Dravidians of India had taken their material and rewrote them in the same way that the Jews of the 5th century took the earlier Amorite, Israelite texts and rewrote them and put new names on the books of the prophets, while many of those books never even mentioned anything in Jewish history, such as Moses and all that. Much of the Old Testament is all Jewish redacted from older Amorite texts from the Hurrians and the Hyksos. But that's another video. That's another video into itself.
Indeed, brother. Indeed. I had a thought, and it's just slipped my mind. We were talking about.
So I'll continue with the Welsh, real quick.
Yeah.
So when the civilization of Aryans that were populating the Near East had fragmented by cataclysm, many of them escaped through the Straits of Gibraltar by ship, and they arrived on the British Isles, became the early Britons. The Irish Book of Invasions, the Book of the Four Masters, the early traditions of Parthenon arriving on the shores of Britain. They were the first settlements after the cataclysm, and they built this fantastic. These are the descendants of the people who wrote the Vedas. There's a huge, fantastic civilization, and evidence of it is found all over the United Kingdom. All the dolmens, all the like Durrington Walls, all these ancient sites in the UK are from the descendants of India when they had left after a cataclysm and migrated. And then more migrations occurred in the 12th century BC after another cataclysm, which was followed by, which you're familiar with, as the invasion of the Sea Peoples, who entered the Mediterranean and pretty much obliterated every single sophisticated civilization that was left after the cataclysm, a second cataclysm. So to escape the Sea Peoples, to escape that federation, this huge collapse of all the infrastructures of the Mediterranean, these people, the descendants of the Aryans, completely settled the UK. I'm telling you, they too were subdivided between different families. The Welsh, the Picts, the Cornwall was completely separate from the Britons of southern England. It says there was like 15 different families of Aryan descended people in the UK at the time. It wasn't until later when the Angles and the Jutes and the Saxons made their invasions, man, and created basically what the DNA makeup of the UK is today. Prior to these 5th, 6th, and 7th century AD or Common Era invasions of European people, basically the UK was populated by people straight from ancient India.
And did these post-cataclysmic travelers and settlers, were they generally harmonious, do you think, before the Anglos and the Saxon invasions?
Okay, you can pretty much answer your own question by me providing you this scenario. Imagine a minority of people who are very white-skinned, green-eyed, blue-eyed, and they're strangers in the land they live in, and the local population, which is 20 times their number, are all black-eyed, dark-skinned, and they rebel against them. They escape in ships. Many of these people, many of the original Aryan people never escaped. But those who were close to the ports, those who had prepared, those who were on fleets made it through the Mediterranean. But the entire time they're leaving the Ionian ports, they're being harried by everybody else in the Mediterranean, because back then, contrary to popular belief, the Mediterranean was a very wild place. There was bandit lords, pirate lords. There was different militaries. It's not like today where a ship pretty much has safe passage. You didn't have safe passage back then. If two ships were working together and saw another ship, they were going to take it. They're going to kill everybody on board. They're going to sell them into slavery, the ones they want. They're going to take the girls and wives and children that they wanted. All the men would be chained to other ships as rowers. That would be the rest of their life would be chained to a ship. We have found many ships in the Mediterranean where the skeletons are still chained to the keels. This was standard practice. So you can answer your own question, Jimmy. This a very small minority from about 15 different families finally escaped the old world and made it to the British Isles. And this event occurred around the 18th century BC. That's when they finally arrived to the British Isles. And some of them went to Ireland, some of them went to Britain, some went to Cornwall, some went to far north, where later were found the Picts and the Welsh. They didn't start there; they were driven there later.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very convoluted history, and I abbreviated it. I really made it more concise than it needed to be. Like I said, it could be a whole.
Thank you, but I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, because you've segued lovely into my next question, which is Tartaria. Let's go to Tartaria. Feel free to take your time, brother. Don't feel the need to be as concise. Take your time and have a good old 10, 15 minutes if you really want to get into it. That's what we're about here, That's my enjoyment. Right. That's my enjoyment.
You probably know more about the Tartaria research than I do. Let me explain.
But without your back knowledge to fit in, so you might give me some little...
Well, I have fitted in. I have fitted in the Chronicon narrative. I just didn't know what I was looking at until I got out and I saw all this research on mud floods in Tartaria. Now, I have the dates for the mud floods. The last one was in 1902, and it was very, very well documented before World War II. After World War II, the history books were absolutely silent about it. Luckily, we still have the writings of Charles Fort. Charles Fort in 1919 had put together over 900 source materials, and he quotes them. And in those source materials, he calls the year 1902 the last dark age. He records hundreds of billions of tons of reddish mud raining all over Europe, Australia, Tasmania, Madagascar, all across the northern half of the continent of Africa. Ships at sea were covered in mud, some of them capsized. The mud fell from a blue sky. Scientists studied in 1902 in the month of May samples from this mud, and they found that up to 35% of it was organic materials. He said, this research isn't found in any books about 1902 published after 1945. You're not going to find it. But if you go to the original material and chase down Charles Fort source materials, you'll find 1902 was a year when volcanoes all over our world erupted. That's not the source of the mud. That's just an effect of whatever was happening to our world at the time. Carbonaceous material that looked like leaves fell from the sky from areas that didn't even have volcanic resurfacing. 1902 is very odd because many things disappeared in that year, like the U.S. Bannock burn, a gigantic ship that was taking badly needed wheat and barley to Europe at the time. In 1902, the ship vanished in front of ship captains on other ships. They documented it. Nowhere in the Great Lakes of the United States is there anywhere deep enough to lose a ship and not be able to find it. The entire Lake Erie was combed for that ship because it was a gigantic barge. The USS Bannock burn vanished after lights were seen in the sea. It's the most famous case from 1902. But also in 1902, other ships recorded a black object off the Atlantic coast that was in the water. Their ships had to navigate around it. Something was in the water that was gigantic but wouldn't let water touch it, because all water that touched it steamed off into a cloud. And they watched it. Now, UFO enthusiasts like to say, well, this is a UFO and all that, and they say that about anything that's unidentified. I don't believe that anymore. Just like the Great Black Death Plague in 1347, all these objects were seen in the sky, but there were like fingers coming from something else, and they were spraying mist. And everywhere they sprayed mist, dead carcasses of decayed, decomposing animals were found all over Europe. And that's from where the Great Black Plague, the bubonic plague, derived from, not rats from ships. My personal interpretation on what's happening to the human family is that we don't only have overseers, but our overseers often dictate when the resets will occur. We've either become too intelligent, we have challenged their authority, or we're discovering too much. Something's going on to initiate these resets. The Great Black Death was one of them, and we have that evidence. I have a video about it. It's very harrowing, the information of what people actually saw at that time, not what the historians of today are saying. So the same concept applies to the mud floods. The last mud flood was 1902. It was very well documented, scrubbed from the history books. Before that, it was 1764, when astronomer Hoffman of the Royal Society was looking through his telescope, when 1/3 of the entire population of Europe stopped what they were doing to go outside because it was absolute silence. Everybody looked up at the sky in May 16th, 1764, looked up and saw the sun absolutely vanish. Astronomer Hoffman recorded it in the minutes of the Royal Society, and he was totally ignored because no objects pass from north to south along the ecliptic to block the sun if it's not the moon. But what's interesting about astronomer Hoffman's research is that we have ancient Egyptian texts and we have Mayan accounts of an object blocking the sun traveling from the northern heavens over the ecliptic to the southern heavens. In every single incident, we're confronted with cities being buried in mud. So the mud flood research is very interesting. I have not had the time to sit down and look at all these Tartarian videos and all that. I know there are correlates that can be derived. I just haven't had time to do the research. But I would like to, but I'm pretty much convinced that they are basically isolating particular incidents that I have already recorded as Phoenix episodes.
That's why it'd be lovely. Thank you, brother. That's why it'd be lovely to get you to a round table with Martin, because you know, this is his bread and butter, the whole kind of mud flood narrative, the Tartaria stuff, and you know, you just see these. You're bound to have seen just the pictures, you know, of the just one or two John Levy videos of all the kind of scored cities that kind of.
Well, Jimmy, the mud flood phenomenon is nothing new. I mean, what we know of Catalhoyuk, what we know of Göbekli Tepe, what we know of the Osirian in Egypt, what we know of Akampearl, and many different ancient pyramids, they were completely buried in mud. And archaeologists would like to convince us that they had such a reverence for their own architecture that the people themselves buried it and then went to another area, which doesn't make any sense, because in order to bury the city of Catalhoyuk in mud would require more labor than building the entire city of Catalhoyuk
in the first place.
So mud floods are very real, and many ancient sites are absolute. It's the reason we have all these ancient texts from Sumerian texts, is because those cities were buried in mud.
Indeed, brother. Indeed. What fascinates me is the whole Greco-Romano construction style. That, you know, if you follow the narratives, just, you know, should only be in certain countries, but yet it's in almost every country on every continent on the planet, which suggests potentially a structured, cohesive, almost worldwide civilization, which is interesting.
There's no doubt. In my own chronicon, I call them the Heliolithic Maritime Empire, because from 1899 BC to 1687 BC, they were. It's documented in so many ancient sources. They were everywhere. In fact, there was a book published in 1921. I cite it in several of my videos, called Children of the Sun. I can't remember the name of the author. I do give him credit, though, in my videos. This man wrote a 500-page book about the year 1688 BC, which was a Phoenix episode, 1687 BC. He was 1 year off, which is pretty good dead reckoning for somebody who didn't have the Phoenix chronology. But he wrote an entire 500-page book about just what happened to the dynasties that used to call themselves Children of the Sun, how every dynasty on this planet collapsed in 1 year. And it too was mud flood. Those cities were completely buried in mud. So returning to your original Tartaria inquiry, is I don't know enough about that aspect. I just know that it's connected to the Phoenix phenomenon, the sun darkening, the sixth seal of the apocalypse. The same thing's going to happen May 16th, 2040. It's no different than all the other episodes that have been happening in the past, that our overseers, the elite, the specialists, have completely covered up and buried all this information from our past and thrown out. All these weird alien theories today. I don't mean alien as an extraterrestrial. I mean unusual. Because I'm going to tell you something you probably already know, but a lot of your listeners don't. But there are organizations that are funded right now that are releasing theories that are backed up with almost BS evidence, but they're doing it intentionally to muddle the waters. They're financially providing these researchers all this money to just promote books and videos and do all this, because it's sending people in the wrong direction. They're all over Facebook. They're all over YouTube. I'm pretty sure they're all over Reddit. But I come into contact with these people all the time. I've had several of them try to infiltrate my own group and steer me in the wrong direction with false information. It's like agents. They're just like agents. They act like operatives. That's who they are.
They're a clear and ever-present danger, Jason. And I'm moving more and more away from the whole Russian call centers full of trolls and all this thing. I think a lot of it is just AI algorithms, and they're just making out, oh yeah, they repair all these humans. Yeah, there's human element to it, but their algorithms, their AI is so advanced now at this point.
Yeah. You do know you'll get an argument. You do know you will get an argument out of me about AI.
Go on, brother. What are your thoughts?
Well, I did release 2 videos about AI. I'm my own mathematical research of the history of the world. I'm convinced 100% AI doesn't exist. AI is a marketing gimmick. It's we can increase processing power, but we cannot mimic using any type of software the human intellect. Our ability, intuition can never be supplemented with software. It's not going to happen. The more we increase our processing power, Google, Yahoo, Amazon, they all love to say, Microsoft, they all love to put something out as the latest AI. As a matter of fact, legally, they can call something artificial intelligence even when it's not. Artificial intelligence doesn't really exist. Like I said, it's a marketing gimmick. So, processing power can exceed the human capacity, but it can never give a computer or a system of algorithms or even integrated algorithms from multiple different computers any ability to reason, to do the things that are so unique to human cognition. It's not going to happen. All we can do is mimic intelligence. We can't actually create it. And the reason I believe this is because, Jimmy, we live in a simulation. We live within a simulated holography, and every time that you go to sleep, your subconscious mind and your central nervous system are jacking you back into something, and there's an exchange of information. You believe you're dreaming. Data is being uploaded from your experiences and being downloaded from somewhere else, which is basically projecting all the event trajectories your life can go in this next period of being awake before you're asleep again. And every single time you go back to sleep, again, you are jacked right back into the holography that contains us. While you're awake, every experience that you have is filtered through sight, through sound, through touch, through hearing, and through taste, and nothing else except for one element that totally makes you different from any AI system ever. And that's your personality. That is the very structure and architecture of your being. You can call it a soul, you can call it whatever you want, but it's something that programming and AI systems will never be able to replicate. We're in an AI system. Therefore, inside that AI system, we will never be able to create another artificial intelligence while we're contained inside of one. My perspective.
And I absolutely love that. And do you know what? It's going to be my mission, dear brother. Where you had your initial cognitive dissonance with religion that you broke through, it's my understanding, not just in my own research, but through a lot of other different things. Very much must give a shout out to Dr. Wong and Justin Danneman, but something called the Sentient World Simulation. Did you ever have the chance to watch any of the Black Mirrors episodes?
What is it called?
Black Mirrors. It's a kind of dystopian TV series.
Never saw it.
Yeah, I didn't think you would have, but we can get to that at some point, hopefully in the near future. And yeah, essentially they're able to kind of mimic alternative virtual reality. It's indistinguishable from waking reality. So we're able to kind of duplicate the human sensorium, then, if you will. Now, if you're taking then the sentient world simulation model, whereby, as you say, yes, we are a personality, but if you're feeding your personality constantly into social media, through your views, through your thoughts, through these recordings and all these other kind of different variations, then what is to say that, whilst you say it'll never be quite human, or whatever this human kind of spirit spark is, it can be very damn bloody close. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't commit to anything. I only believe my own experience, different things that I personally experience. I have kind of an understanding of what's going on that grows every day. But yeah, this has been a fascinating thread, brother. We've gone for a good 90 minutes. What should we what would you like to cover for the last little section? Are there any little poignant thoughts or different things that you've kind of had in the back burner that you wanted to share? Because
Well, I would like to basically conclude with a message that my research is pretty harrowing, and a lot of people come into contact with it and they immediately dismiss it because they don't want it to be true. And this is on multiple levels of our existence, not just the cataclysm resets, but even on a personal level, what it means for us.
Yeah.
But it is my own personal opinion, without any evidence other than my own experiences and what I have gleaned from my research, is that we are absolutely independent from the environment that we're in. Just because we're suffering the physicality doesn't mean we're actually suffering it for real. Let me give you an example.
Love it.
If I died right now, Jimmy, if I got on my motorcycle, I'm on my motorcycle every week. If I get on my motorcycle right now and I ride and I have an accident, come again?
The hog, I was just saying, the motorcycle, the hog, forgive me, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I got a really nice Harley, I do.
I've seen
So
it.
if I get on my bike and I have an accident and I die, either instantly or 3 days later, whatever, I am absolutely convinced that I'm probably going to wake up in a chair or in some type of environment and instantly know that, man, that was an awesome ride. I can't believe, man, in minutes I will realize that I just, in a simulated environment, experienced 47 years. While I was in the simulation, I lived out that whole 47 years. But as soon as I die, I exit the program. I'm no longer in that coding no more. My personality is now jacked into my real me. And I look around and I might be immortal. You might be immortal. We might all be immortal. Heaven and hell is bullshit. You understand? So I would sit in a room and I would sit here and convey my experiences to someone else. And there might be overseers who already know everything that I experienced. Now, it doesn't matter what goes on inside the simulation. We have all kinds of political theories. We got things that we're interested in. We fall in love with some girl over here. All these things are inside the simulation. Outside the simulation, it's real. And this is why so many people experience deja vu. They remember other lives that they had lived. They remember the coding. These are little programming fossils that stay in our psyche. And we remember prior things. This coincidence and this deja vu, every bit of it are memories from other experiences we had as somebody else. So if I die, I don't fear death. If I die, I'm absolutely convinced that I'm going to wake up to this, and it's going to be like, I'm going to talk to people and say, man, this is what I did. This is who I was. And I also believe, on the same token, that when I entered the simulation, it was told to me basically what kind of life I was going to live, not what I was going to learn or how I was going to develop as an immortal spirit, but what I was going to do. And I agreed to that prison. I agreed to the fact that I was, okay, cool, you're going to teach me what you need to teach me, but I'm going to have to go through this. But you're saying I'm going to survive it? Yeah, I'm going to sign me up. And I laid down, they jacked me in, and I went through 26 years and 48 days of Texas prison because I signed up for it, not because I'm a victim of circumstance. It was going to happen anyway. That's my perspective. That's my perspective on what the simulation means to us.
I love it, brother. Thank you so much. And just the one little segment of what you said there resonates so strongly with my own shift in experience that I've discussed multiple times in the podcast, of a shift in experience and my previous 33 years just washing over me as if I just watched a movie, which just basically what you just said there. And, I can't explain it to anyone. Good Lord, I don't know how to explain it, but I experienced it and it resonates with what you just said there. So,
Jimmy, human languages do not have the eloquence to convey truth. You feel truth because it's a vibration in the spirit. It's a force. You're gonna feel what's real, and you're also gonna feel what's not real. You're gonna, you know what I mean? You can separate the wheat from the chaff just from listening to somebody's voice, but it doesn't mean what I'm saying is true. What it means, Jimmy, is that I believe it, and that you understand that I believe it, that I'm not conveying anything that's false. It doesn't mean that that's the truth. We might not be in a simulation, but I believe that we are.
Indeed, brother. Indeed. And it's these moments that make it all worthwhile for me, I think. I really kind of enjoy connecting with people who just all I ask for is an open mind, an open heart, and a good sense of humor. And as long as you've got those three qualities, we'll get on like a bloody house on fire. And it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. And we should definitely connect as soon as we can in the near future. I know you're a very busy man, but we'll make it happen. Was there anything you wanted to kind of finish off with, or?
Let's get Stephen Walsworth on the next one.
Indeed, I've got Stephen's already agreed. He's going to do the round circle. Bless our dear brother. He's had some tragic life events recently. Friends, family.
Yeah, I know.
You know, it's hard to resonate. It's hard to empathize. Not hard to empathize, but I mean, you know, I've not been through anything like what he's been through. So hopefully he'll come back fighting strong in the near future. We've got Stephen Walworth on the card. We've got my dear brother Roger. We're going to do Quark-reversals, which is the term Quark-reversal is looking at things from every single angle, which is obviously what you've done with your lifetime research. And yeah, I'm definitely going to reach out to Martin Leakey and Anthony Peake as well as Justin Danham. And yeah, we'll get a few round tables on the go and start kind of melding all these ideas together, brother, and see what we can do and see what we can create and see what we can share.
Let's do it.
Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Well, listeners, thank you for listening. Anyone from Archaics, please do jump over to EOTT and give us a subscribe. And any of my EOTT listeners, goes without saying, please do jump over and give our Jason a subscribe. And in the meantime, stay safe, take care, love you all, and we'll see you soon. All the best, Jason. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
Good night, y'all.